So this outcome is all about testing the materials, testing the technique, and seeing what things we can do, what effects we can achieve by using these materials and combination of pen and water, and testing those things out so that we then know what we can achieve with the real artwork that we will do next. So the first thing I've got here is a piece of A5 white paper. So just simply the same as half of a page of your sketchbook. If you would like to use a full page of the sketchbook to do these experiments, that's absolutely fine. I think that's probably a good idea. So the next thing I need to do is gather the materials that I'll need. So I've got a pencil here because I might want to draw some little shapes to practice on as well on my practice paper. And then I've gathered all the black pens that I have available to me. So I've got a range of black pens here. I've got some which are quite special art illustration pens, so I happen to have those, but I do realize not everybody may have things like that. I've also got, these will be very important, these will be absolutely necessary, these kind of black felt tip marker pens. You can see here that one is fine and one is thicker. I've also even got just a simple black ballpoint pen. This could be very useful to me later on in the drawing. So this would be useful for me for drawing on top at the end and to refine and add fine details. I've also got then, very importantly, the other side of the technique is the wet part, the element of water. So I've got a glass of water, or a glass of maybe a third full of water. I don't need very much. And I've got a medium-sized paintbrush. You may want to use a slightly smaller paintbrush for some of the finer details. However, I would discourage from using any large paintbrushes. So this medium size, this is a size number 6 paintbrush. This would be the recommended size for both the experiments and for the artwork itself that will come after. I've also got some tissue paper, which I always find is very useful anytime I'm doing something like watercolor painting or the technique I'm trying today. What I want to do here is create a page of experiments, very small, quick experiments of trying out these materials, as I've said before. So in your sketchbook, I would like to see something very similar, a page where you are experimenting with these different media and seeing the potential and also the weaknesses, trying to test out what actually doesn't work very well, and then you'll remember not to do those same things in your main artwork. So let's first of all just simply try out the pens. So over here I'm going to try with my simplest material first, my ballpoint pen. I'm going to make some marks here. So I can draw linear things. I can try and shade with this kind of pen, but it's obviously a very different kind of shading to, say, a pencil. So when I try and shade, as I'm doing here to this sphere, I'm trying to add tone to some of it, I need to cross hatch, and I'm making something that will be quite textured, which is quite different to when I shade with something like a pencil, where I'm able to blend a lot more smoothly and create shading in quite a different way. So with the pen, everything that you do will be all about creating texture, as opposed to something that's very smooth. With this pen as well, this ballpoint pen, I'm quite sure that this is not water soluble, or not very water soluble. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just put a little patch of it, and you'll notice how I'm starting to create a neat little row of little experiments. I've got where I've just colored in a little patch here with the ballpoint pen, and I'm going to test this out now. I'm curious to see what will happen when I wet this pen. So you'll see here that this kind of pen, this ballpoint pen, the type of pen that we would use primarily for writing with, it's not water soluble. So if I cover it with water, the ink will not drag down the page. This can be an advantage for if I want to draw something but I want it to stay exactly intact even after I've been painting water on the drawing itself. Next up then, let's have a look at these pens. So here I've got 3 pens here, and I'm looking at the pens to see if there's some information for me to determine what size or what fineness those pens are. So I can see here certainly with this one, this will be very fine. I'm going to do something similar to the previous pen, so I'm just testing it out again. So it gives me the same sort of fineness as the previous pen, but the color of the ink is slightly different. The color is much more black, whereas the previous pen had a slight bluish quality to it, which is fine. So testing it out, very similar in many respects to the previous. However, I'm curious to see if this pen is also waterproof, let's say, or if by adding waters anything will change. So let's see. So you'll see here that this pen is more water soluble. It will create some sort of tone, but not very much so. I wouldn't say that it's very water soluble. Let's have a quick test of these other 2 pens to see if they're any different. So the same kind of mark is achieved, but I think it's just slightly thicker. Okay, and that's those first pens. So those are the fine pens tested out. So I've got a good understanding of what I can and can't do with those pens already. Next up, I have these pens, which will be very familiar to you from school. These are the ones that we have lots and lots of in school. And these pens will be almost identical to any sort of black marker pen that you can buy in regular sets of, say, felted pens, or when you buy a single marker pen. So you can see here, I'm looking at the pen. Nowhere on the pen does it say the word permanent. So this is telling me that this is a water-soluble pen. It's not a permanent pen, so I'm very certain that when I wet the pen marks on the page, something will happen, something will change. It's not waterproof. So let's test that out. So I know that the green one is thinner than the red one, so I'm going to test it out first. So again, I'm just testing out, seeing what I can do. So obviously I can color in very quickly, just a simple block. I can create cross-hatching by making the lines further apart. So here I'm going from dark to light, and I'm doing that by making the marks have more and more distance as they move across. If I try and do that, say, on a real object, so let's say, again, a sphere. So I'm going to shade there and make it lighter at the top by making it less covered in pen. I'll try and do the same thing but doing it completely with dots. Okay, which is more time consuming, but it can give something effective. And then I want to see next, I want to see how it reacts to water. So I'm going to do another little patch of the black pen. Take my wet brush, not too wet, it's damp, but it's not dripping water on the page or anything like that. And I'm going to just apply a little bit there. And as I move the water down the page, you'll see, I'm just going to take a little bit of water off the brush, you'll see that is diluting the pen almost like watercolor paint. So how can I use that effectively? Let's do another sphere. I'm going to draw it in pencil this time because this is what I'll use to sketch my main artwork. So I've got a sphere here and I want to add shading to the bottom half of the sphere, and I want to do it with pen. So I'm going to add just a line of this pen here around the edge like that, and then I'm going to take a damp brush, so not a very wet brush. I'm going to just go over the pen a little bit first. You can see I'm kind of moving the brush around quite a lot. I'm trying to move that ink off the surface of the paper. I'm going to clean the brush quickly and take the water off. So now I've got a clean damp brush, and I'm going to continue. And what I'm trying to do here is create a smooth blend from dark to light. Looking as well, just put my pencil in my water by accident, I'm curious to know as well what would happen if the page was already wet, so we're doing it reverse, and I put pen on top. So you can see, I don't know if you can see in the video very well, but it creates a kind of an interesting sort of line and texture, which is different to when I apply it onto the dry part of paper. So I'm going to experiment with a second leaf and going from the first one. This time I think I want less of a black outline around this edge of the leaf because I don't feel that looks quite right, but I'll use some of the similar method. So let's draw a similar thing again, drawing a leaf, drawing the pattern that sits down the front. Taking the black ballpoint pen first of all and creating a line drawing. Drawing the veins of the leaf and any other marks and little things I can see. So this time I'm looking more closely at the photo and I'm noticing little dots and little extra textures. Then using this pen to add in some shading. Maybe this time being more considerate about exactly what little corners and things I add the shading to. So in your sketchbooks, I'd like you to do something similar. So do these parts at the top first, and then maybe choose a section of the object that you will be using for the main outcome, and practice drawing that section, testing out whatever pens you might have at home, whatever black marker pens, even if you only have, say, simply a pen like this, a black biro or ballpoint pen, and maybe one black marker pen like this. That should be enough to make some sort of attempt at a similar technique. So those are my parts with the ballpoint pen. And then I'm going to start to use the wet technique again. So if we were in school at the moment trying this technique, we would ordinarily be using black ink. So we would be using black ink from little glass jars, and we use that black ink very similarly to watercolor. And it will give, I'll be honest, it gives a much better and successful effect. But this is what we're doing for the moment. We are improvising with whatever materials we actually have in our homes, or that's easily available for you to find if you don't already have it. Okay, so this second leaf I'm a little bit more happy with. I think the details are a bit better on this one. And then what I can do as it's painted I can, let me just dab a bit of that to make sure it's dry. And I can continue to add on top of what I've already done, whatever layers I've already made, using those pens again. So this is my first page of what we would call experiments and mark making. And so my title for this page, just wherever, I'm going to call it, I call it materials investigation pen and brush.